say you want ink, and the leak say you want ink, you want servicing.
I don't know
Mr.
how Anthony would know if she's not here.
But
How would
Mr.
she know?
Buncamp want to know if you all told him anything. So nobody tell him anything about no ink and nobody telling him about service.
Fellow citizens, near and far, join Newrish Nital on Sugar City 90.3 for Fear No Favor. Tune
When
in
did
to
Anthony say this?
90.3 on your
A
FM
while
dial.
ago, Mr.
Log on to
Buncamp want to know from how you ain't telling
You
anything.
or
hear this in the
download
chat?
Simple Radio app from the
No,
Google
I
Play
call
Store.
her. And I
Enjoy
call
Newrish
Mr.
Nital every
Buncamp.
Thursday night from 8 to 10 p.m.
Oh,
as Newrish Nital
don't know.
tackles the issues that take your call. Fear No Favor every Thursday night from 8 to 10 p.m. on Sugar City 90.3 FM.
Good evening and welcome to Fear No Favor. There are some topical issues that hanging around in our society, and we want to touch on one or two of them, and then I want to put some questions out there to people. One such issue is the conviction of a former minister of government. We would have seen in the local media recently that the Honorable Lindsey Grant, or former Minister Lindsey Grant, was convicted for a situation that took place at Lassa Bar sometime just recently. I think the conviction took place yesterday or whenever. The sentencing is the 21st of this month. A lot of persons might be wondering what are the possible penalties that can be imposed. I really want to wish him well. I really want to wish him well. Other persons in the society are not under the same mindset as I am in respect to that. But a good magistrate can do three things. Could give him a custodial sentence, which I think would never happen. Very small probability that that would happen. He could fine him, or he could give him a time frame in which to pay such fine. He could also look at it as well and say if you pay the fine within a particular period of time, then no record of a conviction would be kept of you in this matter. See, in our society, you have to be very careful. Yes, it is good that somebody could have a clean police record and everything else. But then you could be sending messages to the general public as well that we are developing some sort of two-tier justice system where certain persons are treated one way and others are treated the next way. So it's a very delicate situation because you have persons who are out there trying to get a criminal record expunged and they're catching the tail trying to get that done. Some persons would have been clean for the past 30 years, 20 years, 15 years, and they're still experiencing problems getting their criminal record expunged. And sometimes they need it in order to develop a livelihood because they would have traveled and they have been blocked. I think that the government will have to start to make a more concerted effort to see which records they could expunge and those that can be given different considerations. I think each case must be taken on its own merit. I brought up that because if you're going to, for example, find Mr. Grant and give him a time frame in which to pay that fine, and also promise him that there'll be no criminal record, we're sending some sort of messages, and we have to be careful. Yes, nobody want to wish anybody custodial sentence. Okay, that is good enough. But the record must not just vanish like that. Do what you have to do, and maybe introduce integrate a probation period to say, well, if you behave yourself, conduct yourself appropriately, then within a year and a half, 2 years, then we'll just not record that conviction. But we have to be careful. When we would have held certain positions, we have to carry ourselves and conduct ourselves properly. We have to conduct ourselves. And this is not, Mr. Grant is not the first person that was a part of government or is a part of government that will conduct themselves in those sort of ways. And we have to be careful. Sometimes a sober mind might not do certain things, but sometimes persons might have taken a drink or two. I'm not saying this is the situation with anybody, but I'm saying that sometimes persons might have taken a drink or two and behave out of character, uncharacteristically. We have to conduct ourselves, just like how we call on the ambassadors to conduct themselves in a particular way. We have ministers in the past who would have conducted themselves in awful ways. Awful. We had ministers conducted themselves in such a way that to save them embarrassment, you had to send persons to rescue them, save them the embarrassment. You know, I feel when you put up yourself for those kind of offices, you have to conduct yourself in a particular way. There must be a threshold below which you must not fall. And then you present yourself in court, and then the good magistrates will have to exercise a kind of discretion that could almost give the impression of us developing a two-tier justice system. And we don't want that. We just cannot afford that. You know, even though some persons might have experienced certain things before, and some of them same politicians had so many things to say about individuals. Now, time comes around for them, they're asking for persons to empathize, put themselves in that person's position. What about other persons who would have suffered the consequences and nobody put themselves in their positions? We have to be very, very careful as a society. We cannot send mixed messages. And the last thing we want to do is to let our societal justice system appear to be two-tier or even three tiers. So we'll wait and see. We'll wish the gentleman the best and hope that a non-custodial sentence could be imposed, given a time frame maybe to pay a fine, and once the fine is paid within that time frame, then a probationary period for that person to be of good conduct and behavior, or else the record would be duly filed. Now we just can't say, well, if you pay the fine within a month or 2 months, and we know too, whatever the fine be, Mr. Grant might be able to pay it within a half a day or half a minute or whatever. So that is not really the issue. The issue is, what do you do to keep this gentleman in check with respect to his behavior? If he doesn't have control of himself totally when in a certain condition, try to avoid that condition, because you would not want to violate the instructions or the order of the court for you to maintain the peace and everything else for the next 2 years. Could be a year, could be 2 years. And I think sometimes to guard people against themselves is just as important as guarding others from them. So we'll see how that would go. I know whatever the decision is, you would have antagonistic intervention from other people. But whatever it is, the order of the court shall be final on the 26th to 21st of November. So we have to continue to maintain high standards, and we expect them from those who are high in offices or were high in offices. Okay, just to touch on that topical issue. Now, Carnival is close, and also in social media, you had a real issue resulting from a decision that was made by some authorities surrounding Carnival. Apparently the vendors, they paid some monies to be authorized to vend their craft during the Carnival season. And apparently, maybe short-sightedly, a decision was made asking them not to come out before the 26th of December. And the vendors resisted that decision. If I pay for something now, why should I wait until the 26th of December, all the way down there, to try and get returns on my capital invested? So I think that the minister, quite aware of it, it was brought to his attention, and Minister Huggins, is it Huggins or Duggins? Huggins Minister
Doggins.
Minister Samuel
Doggins.
Duggins. Well, he made a decision to have it turned around a bit and indicated to the authorities to suggest to the vendors that they can come out from the 16th. So that is a good improvement, 10 days better. When people invest, sometimes these permission and permits to carry out the vending is not all that cheap, and people would need a reasonably expanded time frame for them to start doing what they have to do, break even, and then make a little bit off of it. Somehow I feel that our carnival has taken on a business like approach, and some people would be closed out. Some people would feel that it is too expensive, but people do whatever they want to do. Once it's legal and they get in their own satisfaction, deriving their own utility. So those of us looking on, we can critique, but at the same time, if you think it is so much financial pressure to try and afford a particular venture, then leave it. But then having been forced to leave it, then it can have psychological impact on some persons. Everybody looking for an opportunity to invest some capital, and they're looking forward for the return on the capital invested. So good decision. Congratulations to the ministers and the authorities to make some adjustments in the previous, and that is a sign of maturity. That is a sign of sensitivity, that you understand, you listen as a politician or person in authority as a whole. Many times you have to keep your ears close to the ground. You can't make a decision and then go up in a helicopter to take a bird's eye view of the people. Whenever you make a decision, whether tentative or presumably supposed to be permanent, you still have to keep your ears to the ground to see where you can make adjustments. And I think this was an opportune time, and the time frame in which they adjusted must be commended as well. Quick notice. So I hope that the vendors then would have an excellent carnival season, and that those who invested their capital would realize reasonable returns on the capital employed or invested. Okay, so let us get off to carnival on a good note. We have some songs going around. I have not heard much of the calypsos, but I think that I would have heard one from Navigator, the awesome Navigator, celebrating 40 years of independence. I heard one from Godfrey that spoke about the guys in the trenches who seem not to get the best possible return and the energy and time that they put in. I heard one by A. Brown. I think I spoke about that either last week or week before. When he's saying if you don't want to see the skimpiness that Carnival is now offering, then stay home. I heard that one. I also heard one by Blanchett just yesterday. Blanchett one is saying the country running good. The new Labour administration is doing well, and he outlined quite a number of things. Maybe later on in the program, those of you who haven't heard it as yet, I can cue it up, and then you can get a listen of it. I think we can also queue up Godfrey. I'll have to find a way to send it to the email of Sugar City so that we could get a listen. But before we go there, though, we we want to look at a little politics because people must be educated. And if you have a view, nothing wrong with sharing it. Criticizing is different to critiquing. Now, ever since I started to become more aware of socio-economic political issues, I took the stance that I don't want to get involved in any politics. And then I realized that you might have to have a little say. And I thought that the best type of government that could have been formed would have been one of unity. And when I say unity, a combination of persons from all political parties. But that would not have been of a high probability with respect to occurring. But in 2015, you had an attempt at that unity construct between CCM, PLP, and PAM. And I really thought that it was good in the sense, the idea was good in the sense that persons from a wider cross section, the diameter of persons who would have benefited would have been greatest if you had unity construct making up the government. And it happened 2015, then you had 2020, then come the disastrous 2022. So I'm swirling around in my mind. Is it better from an administrative perspective to have a set of representatives from various parties to comprise the government? Or is it better to have a single party making up the administration governing the population? We would have learned from the experience of the unity construct and the challenges that were faced by the various ministers. You see, when you have a single party, even though you're supposed to look after everybody, once it was pragmatic to do so, because everybody would never be included, but decisions would be made to benefit the majority. I have a philosophy that I want to do the greatest good for the greatest number of people. No, I believe that is, whether it is expressed or just merely implied, I believe that is the philosophy of every administration that would have taken the helm of government. Whether or not that would materialize is a whole different story, but I believe that they do try. Now, the unity construct, just in St. Kitts alone, you have PAM and PLP. You had situations where there might have been conflict because the PLP representatives might want to make decisions that would directly benefit their supporters or key supporters. Likewise, PAM would have the same mindset. Then somewhere down the line you have clashes because PAM wants it that way, PLP wants it that way, or even CCM might be part of a three-way titration where they too would like to be involved. And that is difficult, very, very difficult. Because if you had two positions available, for example, and CCM got one, PLP got another one, the PAM representative might feel aggrieved, or he might be promised something next time around. Next time around, you have a situation where only one person is needed. Then the PAM representative could say, look, the last time I gave CCM and PLP, this time I want this one. But then they might not have the most qualified and competent person to put in that position at that particular juncture. So you just don't blindly serve loyalty. You have to make sure it is for the benefit of the entire federation. That might not materialize, or it might materialize. You might make a compromise, a sacrifice, and say, okay, then go with it. But then the person might not perform the way they ought to perform. So you could have a lot of confusion and antagonism when you have a unity construct because three parties involved. If it was a single party, even though it might not be the most appropriate things to do, the most appropriate thing to do, you would have less headache. Because everything is within one party. Mind, even within one party, you have ministers looking out for people in their constituencies. I want this person put on that board. I want that put on that board. I want that one put over there. So even within a single party administration, you would have those sort of antagonistic situation popping up. So you could imagine the problems within a single party, much less when you have three parties making up the administration. And still within a single party, things would not always be nice and dandy. Not because a single party. Sometimes a particular issue could be factious. And factions will start to do what they have to do, and opposition and this and that. But the individual ministers then would have to be strong. You sort out that in private, you make your noise, you got cabinet, you have your little cabinet wars. But when you come to the public now, you have a collective responsibility. Like you have three judges adjudicating a particular case, and you might have one dissenting judge and the others together. Even though it was 2 against 1, the decision would come out as a collective judgment. Well, it is not so easy given our culture of politicking. So even within a single party, there could be problems. The next thing you start to hear about the Joe faction, the Douglas faction, the Jeffrey faction, the Samuel faction. Some issues would have general consensus. Other issues might be factious. And people, our culture is one. We forgive but we don't forget. And that forgiveness is a matter of convenience so that we can just carry on. But at the appropriate juncture in the future, they will remind you of it. It happened in our homes, husband and wife and children, blood related, much less in a cabinet where you have people associated by political outcome. So it is anticipated. So you have to ask a question now. Going forward, do we anticipate seeing a stronger St. Kitts Nevis Labour Party where there is more consensus and less disagreements? Or would you see an attempt at a political union again? Where you see that political union, they came and they approached the people. And the victory was big in 2015, got even bigger in 2020. The crowds on Greenland's pasture, everything. I talk about Greenland's pasture because that is where we are located, Sugar City. And there was a lot of consultation and conversations, and everything went down nice. Now they had the disagreements, and not once did they have a joint consultation between all involved, all representatives involved. Not once. To come to the people and ask them what is the best way forward. And I feel like that was very disrespectful. And many persons felt hurt about that. You came to us. We worked in unison, not only harmonization, just a degree higher. We worked in unison. And then when the problem started, you didn't come back to the people. Some people would have made up their mind that they have nothing else to do with any attempt at any political unity to form the government. Some people made up their mind. Some people might be willing to give a second chance. A second chance to whom? Who is going to get the second chance? Some people feel like PAM and PLP might be able to try again, but with certain players, it might not happen. Might not happen. Some people are asking for new players in order to promote that. Some people feel strongly that without a united front amongst the opposition, Labour might be in power for the next 3, 4, 5 elections. Some people strongly feel that way. Even in Parliament, we have what you call a disjointed opposition. Some people creating a narratives of the debate in a way not to offend the St. Kitts Nevis Labour Party. Some people sitting on the fence. Some people looking for cues to say whether I should go along and voice it loudly, lot of decibel. Some might not agree, but they don't want to say it. Nevis is in a kind of awkward position as well. Nevis is in a very awkward position. Should we oppose and oppose vehemently, or should we just fall in line, categorize ourselves as friendly opposition? It is difficult because it seems as if under any administration, Nevis would never get the sweeter part of the stick. And more we see it's like it's political convenience. So what you expect when they're in Parliament? There was a war between Tim, Mark, and Sean, a political war. At one time it was Mark and Sean against Tim. And then somewhere along the line, some people felt as though Mark outsmarted Sean. So there is a structure that is very amorphous, no texture whatsoever. And I don't know if the voting public would even want to give such a construct a next chance. Even if they were to get different stakeholders, different players, there are some people who are not willing because they have concluded or drawn inferences that it is better for the government ministers to come from one party. Don't care what is going on. There are a lot of people anticipating that there might be an implosion in the labor administration. Some people say that is wishful thinking because we have very intelligent people involved in politics. You have persons who are taught by well experienced people. And even though you see the politicians, they're in parliament, they go cabinet, they go parliament, there are outside forces as well. Why you dare not behave like that? Or you better behave like that? You're behaving nicely. They have outside forces. So what are you seeing? Just the face of the labor, any kind of administration. You're just seeing the face of the party represented by the cabinet of ministers. They're not accountable to themselves. They have other persons, key persons, as part of the party construct that would step in at the appropriate junctures to create harmony. And at the right time, maybe closer to election or even before, you'll find that they work more in unison. Even pocket conversation they will try to avoid because you don't want anything disrupting the probability of you being re-elected. Because a government is campaigning from the time it starts work on the very first day. That is the statistics that you're putting up. The opposition now, that's a disadvantage because you don't have any stats to put up. You're not in power. You're not at the steering wheel. The most they can do is be reactive. The most oppositions can do is be reactive. So they wait for the administration, the ruling and governing administration, to do something. And if 999 of it is great, that one, they're going to pounce on that and make it an issue, even though it might be a bit ambiguous and could be interpreted different ways. They will choose whichever way to make the current administration not look good and to indicate to the potential voters that it ought to have been done that way. But sometimes when you're opposing, you don't always have to oppose in a wholesome fashion. You could agree, yes, they were supposed to do 10 things, and they did 7. You could agree with those 7. And then say, look, I would have preferred if they did add on another 1 or 2, make it 9 out of 10. Or the government might have prioritized, adjusted it, or recalibrate the preference scale with respect to some maybe capital projects. The opposition could come in and say, well, I think that this one should have been more highly prioritized. You don't always have to oppose and say that something is wrong. You could say, yes, everything is right, but the timing could have been adjusted so that you prioritize A instead of B and Z instead of F. I think you get more respect from people if you give credit where credit is due, instead of just coming to criticize or, well, let me say criticize. Because if you critique, you don't give credit where credit is due, and where you think that credit is not deserved, then you would attack that as well. It's a very delicate thing, and voters are becoming wiser and more educated with respect to the politics. Remember, politics is local, You can't bring anybody from overseas to tell us about our politics. And sometimes what is hurtful is that you got people coming who don't know a thing about our local environs and the socio-economic situation. They would hear about it, but people here live in it. You can't take advice from them from those persons alone. You got to go out and talk to people. When you're in a position, you got to talk to people just as if you were trying to get into the government. You have to. Sometimes opposition parties feel like it is the government responsibility to take care of everybody 100%. And that's not a reality. That's not a reality. That is improbable. They cannot take care of everybody. Now let us suppose that the government could take care of 80 out of 100. You want to tell me that the opposing parties can take a 5% and help out that 5%? So PAM help out 5, that help out 5, CCM help out 5, NRP help out 5. That's the other 20. But if you think that the government is supposed to look after everybody and it's going to happen from a pragmatic perspective, that is wishful thinking. There are times when more and more and more people would benefit. But I'm saying you have support. You got to find somebody to look after them too. So Christmas coming up, everybody asking for double salary or fraction thereof. You got I'll come to that. You have Christmas coming up, you want double salary. You want to tell me that none of the opposition parties got a bank account with a balance sheet, with a reserve, to say we could at least help out some people as well? Yeah, and sometimes you try to trick them into giving them a ham, giving them a bottle of wine, giving them. But you can't take the ham down the electricity department to pay bills. You can't pay your house rent with that. I believe that poor people, supporters, whatever you're giving them, it must be supplemented with a monetary gift. So at least they can use the money you give to them to offset certain expenses. A lot of them would feel better. None of the opposition parties around here could say that they don't have a bank account with reserve. None of them could say that. There's always money somewhere, but they will pick and choose who to give. Because if you feel that this person, Mr. A, could try to round up some people to be on your side, maybe 30, 40 of them, you could bet your life you can get something substantial, whereby Mr. B might only be capable of getting 5 persons to definitely commit themselves to support your party. He might not get anything. Not even Mr. C, who guarantee you that you're going to get his vote, you're giving anything. Is there one person up there that A, who seems as if you could get 40 people for you? That's where you put the money. But you tell the others you don't have. Cannot work like that. Even if you're in a position, you're supposed to look after your supporters. And they don't say you have to give everybody $5,000, $10,000. You must be able to look after those supporters from a monetary perspective. You work out the degree to which you can do that. Work out the quantum. You must be able. A political party is a political party. Once ago, we just PAM and Labour. Now we got PAM, Labour, and PLP. PLP got reasonably solid grounds. So with the solid grounds come a bank account. And you know what I find strange? Campaign finance. We, the voters, are completely clueless as to how these campaign finance will go. Nobody wants to give No political party wants to give a full account of the finances they picked up for a political campaign. And I wonder why that is so. Why that is so. Our laws are very slack when it comes to campaign financing. I was listening to CNN and this gentleman now, uh, he having some issues because it is alleged that he received money from foreigners to help in his campaign. Maybe those laws up there say that you're not supposed to collect any money from any foreign organization or foreign country to assist you in your local campaign. I wonder if these laws exist here because I believe every single party, it is my belief, they get money from overseas, they get money from foreigners. But they might claim that they are nationals living abroad. But sometimes it's a little bit more than that. And then to make matters even more complicated and discombobulating is that you have some private sector businesses. If you have three political parties, they're giving the three of them monies for campaign. Now, if you're sensible enough, and it ain't take much sense per se, but if you were just born, you could pick sense out of nonsense. If you have company A giving PLP money, giving St. Kitts Nevis Labour Party money, giving PAM money, what inferences can you draw? That regardless of who wins the election, that particular business would benefit. And part of the benefit come like treating the workers like dogs. And part of the benefit would be when the government trying to increase a minimum wage. They be antagonistic, they resist it. And sometimes the government can't say much because they got the money to help them campaign. And maybe that is why the minimum wage issue is being protracted, taking a longer period than it ought to take. Because you might have all kind of threats and disgruntledness going on amongst those private sector who contributed to campaigns. Look, I give you this, I give you that. You can't come tell me that you carry that minimum wage to $550. That means you're digging into our profits because we have to pay our employees more. And that will always happen when you have private sector donating, making contributions to all the parties. Read between the lines. They don't want to be labeled Labour. They don't want to be labeled PLP. They don't want to be labeled PAM. You think it's that? It ain't that. They want to benefit from whoever wins the election. And they want to be hard to control too. Hard to control. You think if they were really working in unison with the government, the minimum wage could not have been established already? Man, if you put on a penny, they make noise. If you put on 1 cent, ask central bank to bring back the 1 cent and so. You put on that, they make noise. They ain't want nobody put any dent in the extent of the profit that they're making. One set of people supposed to live and others supposed to just merely exist. And those who are merely existing are the ones who are producing more labor via the energy to help them build a multi-financial empire. That's why society and always got issues. Always. They say when the poor go and thief, they should lock up the rich man. We have to come better than this. I want a prime minister who would want one term and shake up all of this. When they get vexed, they get vexed. I'm not looking at any re-electability. One term I want. And I drop the minimum wage in a wink of an eye. You're putting it between $550 and $600. And then what you do? Threaten to what? Let off people? Reduce the hours? But you're creating a vexed society. And vexed society that got repercussions. Even if you have to give the little extra, how much of a percentage is that of your profit? How much of a percentage is that of the empire that these poor people don't help you to build? So poor people must live from day to day. And you and your family must live decade after decade after decade. So who are alive right now must struggle to live from day to day. But you must secure financial stability for about 5-6 generations of yours going forward. But that can't be. That could never be. Because the Almighty, that supreme being of which nothing greater can be perceived, He has a way of equalizing stuff. You might save the millions, but can't live another 7 days to enjoy it. He's above looking down at his turtle doves. So you think that you could rob poor people, disadvantage poor people, build your mighty empire, and then live to see what, 500 years? There's a God above. And even though when you're doing your books, you do one for in-house and one to publish your accounts. Whether you put one for in-house and keep it away from the general public, and then the one for the public, so that you let the public see what you want them to see, nothing wrong with that. The Almighty don't see both books. Both accounts they would see. And that is where He would make His decision to equalize mankind from whatever perspective He deems fit. There's sufficient money around here in St. Kitts. I once did a song, Spread the Money. The problem ain't no money. The problem is poor distribution of the money that we have around here. Poor, very, very poor distribution. A poor man buys a piece of land, paid off for it, and some smart poor person who trying to play rich or socialize and retrofit themselves into those brackets, gonna let them know that they must come back for the money because they want back the land. And you got some rich people with 10, 14, 15, 20 pieces of land. If they have one piece, it could be equated to 15, 20 pieces. Nobody egging them to take back them kind of land there. You know, psychologically damaging that could be. Why the people with so much money don't want to see poor people get anything? It must be a burden. Why? You get a piece of land, they want to communicate and converse with the persons who giving out land. You gave Mr. A piece of land. I realize it is in our neighborhood. But we want people like them down there, them that too poor to get in our neighborhood. We done got up our $1.5 million house. You give a poor man a piece of land. He gonna come and he put up a $125,000 house, bringing down the value of ours. But that got anything to do with them? But these are the extent that people would behave. This is the conduct of some people. You can't go build a 2-bedroom house by a man $1.5 million house. But who's supposed to decide that? Who's supposed to decide that? There must be some degree of collusion for persons not wanting to sell individuals land in a particular area. There must be colluding. I may want a 2-bedroom house, may want a 1-bedroom here. This is my $2 million house. You ever do that, they might end up in the psychiatric ward. They stress themselves. I wouldn't even say psychiatric, they end up in ICU. How they stress themselves on a daily basis as to why they gave this man authority to build this 2-bedroom house. All the man want to do is live comfortably. The man don't recognize he ain't hanging he had higher than he could reach. Or you prefer the man to go. Well, I don't even know how he can get the loan in the first place. Maybe some politician might grant him a favor, give him the equivalent of about $750,000 or close to $1 million. Might have a few family members who would be willing to sign and say all of us responsibility to do this. And then when the net disposable income based on how much they have to pay the bank a month, the net disposable income start to get smaller and smaller and smaller. They can't keep on the lights. The water can't be kept on despite only $20 a month. What do you think can happen? You're going to end up to be the survival of the fittest. Because the same people you're forced to put up a $750,000 house or even $1 million house, it's the same people who net disposable income would be depleted, and then they might have to turn on and rob even you to survive. So we got to be careful. We got to look at repercussions. You can't force a man out of the comfort zone because you don't want him in your neighborhood, or force him to overwhelm himself financially because he has to have the look-alike. Everything would have repercussions. Should be happy for neighbors. Be happy for neighbors. Much rich people got people who him come around to give them a bowl of porridge. Scratch their back. Cut their toenails, cut their fingernails. It's one of these same poor person you will call. Same poor person you will call to fill that void when the generation that you're putting up for ain't paying you any attention. Check out the homes. See if you see rich people working in rich people's house as laborers or as domestic workers. That can't happen. You could get a family of 20 living in your mighty mansion, and you can't get one of them to fix the sheet and the bed. Sometimes it's like that. They take out the clothes and they leave them right there. You got to rely on the poor domestic worker to come and take underwear off the ground, brief off the ground, shirt off the ground, pants off the ground, as if the household people got steel in their back. Can't bend down to take up even the underwear off the ground. Because it is beyond them. The kind of mentality we have. The older set of people supposed to be doing a certain type of job. And sometimes those poor people, they got to travel far to go and do the work of the rich people. When they done, they come out on the main road. Could I get a lift back town? Could I get a lift back? I mean, that thing that really hurt me, man. You just don't clean up a big mansion, 5 cars in the yard, and then you got to come on the main road to beg a ride to go back town. You ain't even on the bus route. Those things should no longer be accepted. Not even a little traveling allowance so they could get the services of Ubers. We got to become more considerate and loving than that. We got more love to spread in this society. I see Dr. Powell. It's an article there where he's trying to promote love. Forget about the violence and taking advantage of people. We want love for the carnival season, a season that is usually marred with things that inadvertently or adversely impact us. Love is a major thing. And if you could put somebody on the road, and most of the time it's a female, who just don't tidy up your house, especially around this time of the year, the Christmas cleanup. Lord, and your conscience wouldn't tell you to him jump in your bloody car and give the people them a lift back where they're going. That is a mindset, that is a disease. You call that a diseased mind. Somebody gonna come and improve the hygiene in your house. As if it's a rose garden, giving off a nice aroma. But when they finish, they're going to the gate. Just remember to secure the gate, put across this, put across that. 5 cars park up in the yard. These people feel real bad. They got children too. You think the children don't think about that? To see this disadvantage you put in the sister too, the auntie, the mother, even the grandparents at times. Because you think your mindset is to get what you want, get done. That is very, very inconsiderate. That is the conduct of psychopaths. No empathy at all for people. And most psychopaths got the part of the brain that is responsible for empathy underdeveloped. So maybe it might be a biological thing for some of you. Help out, man. Let us take a break and come back. Welcome back. I was about to come off of that topic, but I just want to touch another centimeter or two. You have these poor people going to the rich people in homes to assist them in domestic work. You have dining room tables with maybe 8 seats, and at times they might offer the poor woman something to eat. Saying that they really care whether she's hungry or not. But they feel like they want her to stick around long and they don't want her to fall down. So they offer a little thing to eat. And despite so many chairs being around the dining table, because they got the fancy tables and all sort of stuff. You man got to find a room and some step to sit down to eat. The same tables that she clean up nicely, even polish at times, those same tables are too good for the cleaner to sit down by and eat comfortably. And you tell me everybody got a heart? I'm into science, but more and more I believe that some people don't really have a heart. The day would come when it might be proven one way or the other. But that is my strong conviction that there are people living amongst us who don't have a heart, which could be equated to a very cold heart. And a very cold heart might not be able to function, so you might as well say they don't have a heart. Yeah, I really needed to push in that one. And you're not making up anything. You get stories from people, or you get truth from people regarding the situation where they're doing domestic work for others. 5 cars in the garage and people must go outside, go flag a vehicle, so tired. You expect one of these days when they flag in the vehicle, they might fall down. How tired they are, no energy. And the last set of flagging took the last sort of energy they had and they just fall down. Vehicle run over them. We're not mindful of that. We're not doing our permutations and combination of possibilities. Tired people will fall down. Yeah, you put a tired person on the thing to go flag away to go home after providing you with 110% comfort. Now, let us look at our next topic. We have a federation. You have St. Kitts and Nevis. Nevis has its own assembly. Technically, they don't have any place called St. Kitts. You have a place called St. Kitts and Nevis. And you have a place called Nevis. So you got St. Kitts and Nevis and you got Nevis. There's no St. Kitts. That is how our constitution is constructed. Or that is the reality. St. Kitts and Nevis, Nevis. So technically, when we do a budget, St. Kitts monies would be placed in the St. Kitts Nevis money, because there is no St. Kitts. Nevis, of course, will get its portion of the St. Kitts and Nevis money. And the Nevis on itself could raise revenue that would relate only to Nevis. So if there's no St. Kitts, how can St. Kitts raise revenue that would pertain only to Kittitians? You see how that constitution is heavily flawed? every cent Kittians make would have to be placed in St. Kitts Nevis. Just imagine we got a little circle there. And it would have to be shared between St. Kitts and Nevis. Now, Nevis makes or generate its own revenue in certain things, and the money stays with Nevisians. Don't get me wrong, it's simply logic. And I don't believe that this political union should continue like that. Because just like how the Premier Nevis always want to indicate that he wants his fair share for Nevisians. You got people in Sadlers, Deptbear, Sandy Point, Newton Ground, Tabernacle, Mansion, Molyneux, Phillips's, all over who want the fair share too. They want the fair share as well. If the Federation has a constitution that speaks to St. Kitts and Nevis, the Nevis would have to be considered as one of the several fractions that would benefit from financial or revenue generation. So just like Nevis is a fraction, Newton Gong is a fraction. Deptbear is a fraction. St. Paul's is a fraction. Mansion, Tabernacle, Molyneux, Phillips's, Atleys, Lodge, Keyon, Brighton. All those are fractions of our federation. So when one fraction claiming that it must get its fair share, but the many other factions can do the same thing. The many other factions can do the same thing. And I think that it is time that we have to, with some degree of urgency, move to become a republic. So Kittitians could put money on a St. Kitts account. Nevis could generate the revenue, put it on a Nevisian account, a Nevis account. And then that common overlapping area would now come to the republic or each country, each island. St. Kitts Nevis, you join them there, that's the intersection. And then you got St. Kitts. You think about a Venn diagram, you got the intersection St. Kitts and Nevis. You got St. Kitts only, you got Nevis only. That would be a better political organization or structure. The one that we have is, we have a circle there for St. Kitts and Nevis. And we have a circle there with Nevis. Distinct and separate at times from the St. Kitts and Nevis circle. That is a tough one for those who really think deeply about it. That is a tough one. And I believe that the political affairs can be improved by going into a republic. This federation thing ain't working. And it will never work. At the nucleus of it is political convenience. St. Kitts people are being disadvantaged because there is no St. Kitts. There's a St. Kitts Nevis. Nevis people, they're in a good position. They just got to use their heads. They generate their own and they still dig into the coffers of the Federation money kit. I believe it's high time we're done with that. That is my opinion. They might have some great minds. I'm just a simple-minded person. Some people might say it's going to be very difficult. difficult. If you really want to do it, you will do it. And in the same way, who knows, Navies could come up with their own CBI program. Navies Senkis could come up with theirs. And nobody would have to bawl for any fair share. What you generate is yours. Maybe at the intersection there, certain things can be done. Because, of course, we have a larger population, a larger size than over there. You know what is funny? We go to Parliament. The budget is coming up. The appropriation, the monies that they appropriate to be spent for the upcoming year. And that is federal money. Federal money. Taxpayers' money. And one time I listened a wager program where the Premier of Navies indicated that somebody seemed as if they want to ask them what they do with the money that they got from the federal government. I don't know if that's a bad question. If you're getting taxpayers' money, in some way, shape, or form, you have to give account for it. But if you're going to publicly say, anybody, any division, who are going to say when Navies get the money from the federal treasury, that nobody should ask them what they do with it. But I don't understand that. That's a recipe for disaster. That is a recipe to destroy accountability. That is fertile grounds for a lot of things to happen that ought not to happen. If I give you $10 million from out the taxpayers' money, you want to tell me nowhere along the line I could have a record. You got the monies, BAP, what you did with it. That is the only way you can do a reconciliation statement. But if you don't indicate what you did with the money, how are we supposed to know what was spent and how it was spent? What is still in reserve, what you did not spend? How would we know? So when you want a gain, it's like an impress system. We give you 10 million and you use and you use and you use and you provide receipts and proof that you would have used this amount. And when you reach down to just 500,000, we give you the difference. Whatever you spend, we reimburse. You call it the impressed system in accounting. Like you have a float, you have a petty cashier. You give the petty cashier a float of $5,000. And you go every 28th of the month to check to see the level of the float. If the petty cashier, when you have a main cashier, you got your cash book and you do whatever for money transactions. If the petty cashier, when you go, the petty cashier has only $200 remaining, you have to give the petty cashier money to make it back up to the 5,000. There might come a time when you go and the petty cashier only has $1 remaining. That would tell you that the float that you're giving the petty cashier must be up. 5,000 ain't enough. The risk, they came very close to the edge. So next time you might have to give them $8,000 for them to be more comfortable coming on to the end of the month, at the 28th of the month. But if you don't know this, how would you know how to re-establish the impressed system and the amount of float that is associated for that month period? You must give an account. if you want to be continued to be helped, you have to manifest proof of the spending. Manifest proof of the spending. That's what reconciliation statements are all about. Nothing wrong with helping, nothing wrong with getting your share. But not because it's your share. It's your share. It's taxpayers' money. You have to give an account for it. And I would like Parliament to start elaborating a little bit more, not on just the monies that are there to be spent. We want to get accountability for how the monies were spent. Unless Parliament is not doing what it's supposed to do. Yeah, so you just come and give a budget, an estimate of the spending for the upcoming year, and then we come back the next time and do that again for the next year without even a proper accountability of how the money was spent, how much was spent, how much was left. You might have given, what, 400,000 this year. And coming on to September, you're scrabbling. You're telling your workers you can't do this, you can't buy paper, you can't buy ink, you can't buy anything because you're close to budget time. And some of them in charge of the departments, they don't want to do much spending at the beginning because they don't know how the rest of the year would turn out. So they're keeping a lot in reserve. Half year, they still, well, they got another half year to go, so we still got to be a little bit on the conservative side. So they hold back. Some of them seem as if they want to hold back 75% of the money that was allocated to them. The money was meant to be spent unless your budget and your budget hearings and your budget meeting would not make any sense. If you're going to give back 75% of the monies that was put aside for you, there's something that will happen. Something have to had happened for you to got 75% remaining. The guy who gets down to 95%, 98%, you could see that was precise budgeting, very, very close. Or manage the monies at the appropriate times to make sure that at least something is left before the next reimbursement at the other appropriation hearing. But we have to do that. Sometimes you used to have to wonder whether these people, directors and so, getting a percentage of what they save, a commission on what they save. That's something the department them struggling to stay afloat in their functioning. Struggling. But yet 60% of the money is still there, 70% of the money. So we just have to ask the question whether or not they're getting a commission. And I think that our parliament will have to take it further. Give an account for the monies that were spent. This is an estimate now, you know. When you had a budget, you estimate how much a particular department might need. And those who are experienced in the budgeting would offer guidance. So you work out that it would be roughly this, plus or minus $200 here, $200, plus or minus $200. And you come close to it. But when you don't do that, you got to come back and you say how much you have remaining. But how much you have remaining must be subtracted from how much you got initially and give you the exact figure as to how much was spent. This ain't a budgeting now, you know. This ain't a guessing, this ain't an estimate. If you get $400 and you bring back in $5, obviously you spend $395. So all by the $395 side. Ain't an estimate, you spend the money. So itemize what you spent the money on and make sure it comes up to $395. Even if you took out a set of friends or family members to eat something out of that budgetary amount, but you got to put in that too. Unless your reconciliation statement would be off. And sometimes you have some persons that like to put in sundry expenses, or they describe it as miscellaneous expenses. So they lump a lot of small amounts there that they feel it might not be worth the time itemizing them. But that is where a lot of stupidness would happen. Way back on the estates and such things like that used to happen. You got sundry expenses are miscellaneous. And sometimes the miscellaneous expenses is so high. But they claim that the many items inside there is the reason. But if you look at items coming up to so much, one or two of them might be big enough to be removed from the miscellaneous and placed on a line by themselves. Sundry expenses is supposed to be a small amount, not great significance. But a lot of people, when they realize that, they like to charge to sundry expenses. And that is how the little nipping off and nipping off would come in. This is how accountability become diluted. Because you might put in the big items, but you may put in a lot of small items that come up as much as a particular big item. We would prefer that you have your budget. Maybe before your budget, you have a parliamentary hearing where people account for how much they spend. You have estimates down line, people could buy one, and then you say, well, but Mr. Peter said he spent 550,000 or 500,000. But the estimate for the budget, he got 1 million. Okay, you spend that, you got 1 million, so that means 500,000 should be left. But when they check, it's only 200,000 remaining. So where the other 300,000 gone? Where it gone? That is where the auditing department would have to come into being, start doing some work along that line, and let them account for the monies that they spent. They have to. Unless this appropriation bill and the amount and so, it will be lacking something. I would like to describe it as being incomplete until you could match what was actually spent and have it subtracted from the amount that was given in the estimate. And then look to see what you have remaining. Because money is something, you know, there's an accounting question you'll find in a multiple choice. Could you spend more money than you have? No, if you only got $50, you could only spend $50. If you go over to $70, that is some kind of credit arrangement, overdraft arrangement. But you could only spend, you cannot spend more money than what you have. Never. If you have $100, you could only spend $100. You could spend less, but you can't spend more. So they'll ask you why the cash account doesn't have a credit balance. Cash account can't have any credit balance. Because if you start out with $500 on your debit side. All the items them that you buy and you put on the credit side. They could only come back up to an equivalent 500. You could only spend the money that you have. A cash account could never ever have a credit balance brought down. Get put it on the debit side. All the interest when you spend, you put it on the credit side. Unless we have miracles happening still. Yeah, we have to give a little more accountability. Things getting a little bit more tight. And we have to make sure that accountability is given. And I also believe, I said it already and I'm going to say it again. I also believe that all capital projects must be accounted for 100%. They must be well managed. Because you see, you have contractors, and you have persons who are responsible for giving them contracts. And if I give in Mr. M a contract, I could say, boy, since I'm helping you out, I scratch your back, you got to scratch mine. Put in a little extra $75,000. So if it's 300,000, put in 375. Or maybe that might be a little bit too obvious and might arouse suspicion. So if it is 750,000, put in 825. Put in the extra 75. Might be less obvious and arouse less suspicion. The bigger the amount is. And then even before you start the project, you siphon off the 75 to whoever gave you the contract. And it is my strong belief that throughout the years of our government, various administrations, things like that would have happened. I hope that it would not continue to happen. I hope it would not continue to happen. So therefore, sometimes when a major capital project is carried out, there ought to be some auditing and a friendly inquiry. Friendly inquiry and stiff auditing. Because we have a history in the Caribbean region, and St. Kitts is no exception, Nevis is no exception, where you have a lot of costs overrun with several capital projects. How come a man never asks for $700,000 to do a project and bring back in 150 costs on the run? How come you don't have those situations occurring? How come you always want more? You ask for 700,000, we give you. You're coming back sometime down the road for another 250. Why the cost overrun? Were you so slow in the project that the price of things went up? Was there a war in the Caribbean that people can't bring in the supplies to our shores? Why was there a cost overrun? Did you do it out of time so the supplies went up? We'll have to establish that. A cost overrun just shouldn't go like that. There got to be massive discussion about that. We have a project down Church Street that would have totally blocked off Princess Street coming into Church Street. The Printry project. When that would finish, is there a cost overrun? We need to come to taxpayers and let them know. Whoever administration started out that would have to come to the table and sit down, and the contractors and subcontractors, Tell us why that project has not been completed. And that is why, you could run your politics and you could oppose each other. But when it comes to the spending of taxpayers' money, they must work in unison. And that is why I always say that when there's a change of government, there must be a grace period. I'll say about 3 months where people continue to work together. You see, sometimes the party, the administration that is coming in, they can't trust the administration that is going out. Because sometimes that is the very reason why they're on their way out. You don't want to give them any chance to go and make adjustment in this, adjustment in that. But I believe that there should be a grace period for proper handing over. Politicians must be trustworthy. They must be honest. So when the administration changes, you have communication, dialogue. How much you have in that, how much you have in that. I mean, the PSM is supposed to play a critical role with a change of administration, because PS is not supposed to change when administration changes, When an administration changes to hand over to another administration, the PSM is supposed to be there as pillars. Unless we could end up in some confusion, because one administration might have started a contract with somebody. And if you do not find all the documentations, everything that is documented, could create a little headache for the incoming administration. And we around here, sometimes sometimes you got your contracts written. But sometimes also a major part of the contract for the citizens them to benefit was spoken instead of written. And something that is a problem. We have a way of putting things on paper to benefit others. But speaking for our benefits. So sometimes you do not have full documentation. Sometimes you even have things implied rather than expressed. Anybody could go and deny things. And we need to come better than this. We need to come better than this. Government is like a relay. Administrations come and administration go. But that baton, the national baton of governance is key. You can't run a relay and reach by the first handover. And then the person at the first handover take a diagonal cross run and give it to the person up there in the final leg. You're not supposed to go like that. And sometimes the way our politics go here in terms of changes of government, it seems as if you do the first handover and then we just diagonally go up to the end. So only 3 persons would run instead of 4. We need complete accountability right around the track, from station 1 to 2 to 3 to 4. And of course, we don't even go back to the beginning. But the 4th man must get a baton. Continuity. I think we could manage our stuff a little better than that. We have to husband our resources. So therefore, we must account for every cent. And sometimes that is why you have so much falling out. Because you're just asking people to account for this, they're getting frustrated. Well, if everybody did things in an honest way, and you ask for accountability so you can reconcile, and then thereafter continue. You can't continue if you're in a way continuing from. So we would have to dig deep and see how we can adjust the accountability issue that is haunting us at times. We have to. Let us take a break. Come back. You ready? Yes, welcome back to Fear Now Favor. We have another 15 minutes, and I would like to look at the dividend from the CBI revenue. Now, sometimes when you're campaigning, you can make certain promises. And some people like to say a promise is a comfort to a fool. And the reason they might say that is because they are quite aware that factors, circumstances can change, and things could be differently constructed. Circumstances can be different. Different factors can present themselves that you were not aware of based on the trajectory that you were on. You are not aware that somewhere along that trajectory you could have a pop up or several pop ups of factors that would slightly derail you. Just think about a train running along a track. You only take a particular size object at a particular juncture along that track to cause the engine or the locomotive or the train to run off its tracks. We used to have locomotives here pulling the cane from estates to the factory, and quite a number of times engines would have gotten derailed by some sort of object in the line of the pathway of the track. Now, like a politician, you can promise and then When reality, ideally you would like to do something, but when reality jumps in, it's a whole different story. Because now you have access to everything and you're seeing the light, you're seeing it better. No more speculation. You have the facts in front of you. And sometimes things would not afford you to carry out the promises that you made. And see, some politicians would want us to hold the politicians in government steadfastly to their promises when they know for a fact that there are many different combination of factors that can cause that particular promise not to be kept. So sometimes there's a little bit of deception and dishonesty on behalf of others who want you not to waver in your expectations. But if I'm in charge, I'll have to be mature enough to say, yes, I promise you $50. But when I examine the finances, I could only give you 35. But if I could only give you 35, I cannot get 50 out of 35. I cannot get 50 out of 35. So ideally, I would have liked to give 50. When everything was assessed, I could only give 35. You can't hold that against somebody. The necessary resources would have to be available for me to give the 50. And that is why you see sometimes when coming on to Christmas, you have some private sectors. They would want to give their workers 10% as a bonus. And then in some situation where they don't say 10%, they realize only 5% they could give. Well, the worst thing you could do is tell employees that you're giving them 10%. And then when reality hits now, you realize only 5%. So you have to do it the next way. You say, look, I'm going to give you all 5% bonus for Christmas. And then since things would have been better than you anticipated, I'm now going to give you all 10%. The hearts would be warmer, much warmer than if you tell them you give them 10 and you could only manage 5. They call that the prudent concept. You cannot set up people. You got to be prudent. If you're not absolutely certain, you have to find a comfortable middle ground to make your promise from. And yes, the good PM would have indicated that he would pay a percentage of the dividend received from the CBI. And that was a good gesture. I don't know if he qualified it or he did it at one point in time or he did it at a later time. But the reality is that if I decide I'm going to pay 10% of the dividend and 10% of the profit as dividend, and I get $100, you get $10. But if there was zero, 10% of zero is zero. If instead of 100 you had 80, 10%, you're still keeping your promise with your 10%, but it'll go down to 8. Then if it is only 60, then it'll go down to 6. If it is only 20, then it'll go down to 2. If it's only 10, it'll go down to $1. And as you see, the promise is being kept with 10%. But 10%, the quantity you're finding 10% of is being decreased. We wouldn't want to put it in a situation where you say, well, you make zero profit off of your CBI. So we took it down as far as 10, so you get $1. National Bank, I don't know, in 2022, they didn't pay the shareholders any dividend. I mean, this is a bank that is big, real big throughout the Caribbean, one of the better banks, if not the best. And they failed to pay dividend to the shareholders. I think it's in 2022. I don't think it ever happened before. But I think that was the situation. But the promise, the shareholders, dividend, a share of the dividend, a share of the profit, a share of the profit. I don't know what kind of shares they have. They have ordinary shares, they got preference shares, they got cumulative shares, cumulative preference shares. So maybe it's ordinary shares. So if in 2022 they did not pay any, you can't pay if there is nothing to be paid. You cannot pay if there is nothing to be paid. So we too would have to be aware, ask questions, and get an idea as to whether or not the government is in a position to do that and they're just mama guying you, or they're just not in a position to do it. When I heard the Prime Minister indicated that he had to interfere with the national reserves in order to keep certain social services, benefits buoyant, I think a good question to ask is what percentage we think we should have as national reserves? What is the threshold below which we must not go? Then if we have to use and use, there must be a limit. And the funny thing about that, if you would have established some social benefits via social safety nets, and you have to maintain them, that means that your reserves might have to dip and dip and dip. So which do you prefer? To reduce the extent of the social benefits, finish away with some of the social benefits? No government would want to do that, especially if it is providing a sort of safety net. So you would have to make up your mind that apart from those well-established social programs, could we add anything to supplement them at Christmas, at Independence, whatever? And then you'll work out how much our supplemental income can we give to our people. There must be some kind of calculations. Of course, we don't want our country going back into the laps of the IMF. We have to keep our debt to GDP under control. That reserve would have to have a threshold below which it would not go. And in the event that that happens, that we come very close to it, there might not be the extra benefit that we would like around December. It might not be the extra benefits or additionalities that we get June and December from the dividend, the CBI, as CBI dividend. So we must be considerate. Don't let anybody pump us up that because a promise was made. But the factors are not like in a test tube controlled. You have changes. It is not a static financial environment. It is dynamic. Certain things would influence and impact the financial standing of St. Kitts Nevis differently. And we have to understand that. Don't let anybody rile us up. Don't let anybody push us to get angry at somebody who promised you 10% of something, but they're not indicating to you that the amount that you're finding 10% of is less than what it was last year. Might even be less next year, or it could be more. We got to be open-minded. But I guess it's up to the politician and to tell people, educate people. I listened to PM trying to explain away that he did not promise every June and December that he would pay a percentage of the profit made from the CBI or the revenue generated from the CBI. But maybe somewhere implied in there when he made the promise was that it depends on what is available. If it depends on what is available, you would have to try to know what is available. But we put them there, we have entrusted our hopes and confidence in them. So if they come and they say, well, only this can be paid, or based on the trajectory, things will get a little tight by February, March next year. So we're pulling back that. We gave everybody 1,000 for independence. We give some 500, some 250 for the CBI part of the dividend. Now we might have to be reduced. It could go down to 125 and 250. At least something would be given. And people, something is always better than nothing. But just try to understand. Don't let nobody take you back in any manifesto. Manifesto were done with maybe the condition being ideal to carry out those promises. But then when reality confronts the situation, most of the time the ideal situation gets destroyed, gets devoured, and reality would have to take over, supersede, override. Okay? So let us be patient, let us be hopeful. The good-hearted PM would never leave you without a supplemental additionality so that you can spread your joy in the festive season. We have come to the end of our program, and thank you for listening, and I will see you next week, same time. Thank you.
That you refrain from any such statements.
Fellow citizens, near and far, join Newrish Nital on Sugar City 90.3 for Fear No Favor. Tune in to 90.3 on your FM dial. Log on to sugarcityfmsinkits.com or download Simple Radio app from the Google Play Store and join Nital every Thursday night from 8 to 10 p.m. as Newrish Nital tackles the issues and take your call. Fear nor favor every Thursday night from 8 to 10 p.m. on Sugar City 90.3 FM.